Hello, ninth grade Pathways students. You may hear a difference in the audio. It's not you, it's me, because having a little trouble with my big microphone connecting to my computer. And after an hour and a half, I am just switched to the computer audio, which is terrible, but that's where we're at. And never mind. I digress. Anyhow, we were talking about waves, and we will continue to talk about waves here. I'll get my ceiling out of the way. Before we get to this fancy drawing, we're going to get to this fancy drawing because this makes me happy because these two people feel like I don't today because they weren't dealing with microphone issues, but nevertheless, we move on. So like I said, before we get to this good drawing, let's get to this fun drawing. So here's our two friends, and they are having fun with a purple rope, and they're making a wave in it. So let's go over a few things that we learned last week. Okay, and maybe we can put some fancy labels in here. Okay, we're gonna look at what that part is. We want to look to see what that part, we'll put it way up there. See what that part is, right there. All right, and we'll look to see, we'll put one of these on there. Oh, we're gonna have to flip that bad boy around. Now we got a smiley face. We don't want that. What we want is that. Oh, let's turn a little bit more. There we go. And let's put another shape in here. Let's go vertical. And there you go. We'll do one here. All right, so let's start. So the top of the wave, top of this wave here, every top of the wave is called a crest. And every bottom of the wave is a trough. Trough, trough, crest, crest, crest. And you can also measure the amplitude, how much energy is going into this. And you can measure the amplitude in all of these spots for the different ones because it looks like there's a different amplitude. And when I measure that, I get an idea of how much energy was put into it. I measure this amplitude, and I'm measuring it here from a certain point. We'll talk about that in a second. But this is the amplitude. So we're going to put another shape in there. Right there. Right there. I'm just going to put AMP for short, but we know we're talking amplitude. You may have even heard of an amp. Amplitude. Amplitude. Right? You can also measure the amplitude from this point here down to a trough. You can measure from this point to a crest or this point to a trough. So this is a measurement of the amplitude as well. I can spell amp correctly. That is a measure of the amplitude, and so is that. You can measure the amplitude from that point, and we'll stop calling it that point in a second, from that point to any top of the crest or any of the trough. Now, last week, we talked about that point where the wave was resting. And if this was on the ground, this would be the resting point. But it also could be in the air. Like these two people could have had that rope straight across between them. And there's a technical term for that, and that's called the equilibrium. That line that was that resting point, whether it be on the ground or in the air or anywhere, that resting point is the equilibrium. So we're going to draw fancy. We're all getting all kind of fancy here today. So this right here, that right there, that dotted line is the equilibrium. Equilibrium. It's a lot of vowels in that. Equilibrium. That's this original sort of resting point here. There, they had it tight. If you just by yourself, you have a garden hose or a rope on the ground, the equilibrium is that resting point right on the ground, equilibrium. Okay. Now, the last thing that you can measure here is the wavelength, and that's here. Wavelength. And you can measure the wavelength in 3 different general spots. You can measure the wavelength. I'm going to put WL for wavelength. You can measure that. I'm getting all kind of crazy up here. You can measure the wavelength from either crest to crest. Okay, so I measure from this crest to this crest. That will tell me that wavelength. Or from trough to trough. Trough to trough. So I can measure this wavelength right here, or this wavelength, or this wavelength. The other place I can measure a wavelength is where it crosses the equilibrium. So I can go from like here to here. I can pick 2 spots on here on the equilibrium where the wave crosses it. So I can go from here to here. Or we're going to say, we'll just put EQ, from equilibrium to equilibrium intersection. So I can measure that, and I'll put a red dot from like here to there. I could do wavelength from there to there also. 2 spots where it crosses the equilibrium, or I can go from here to there. I can measure the wavelength there. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now switch to this. I'm going to put this PDF in the Google Classroom, right? And what I want you to do, and this will be part of your participation, is make a document, okay, and then just submit the answers, like 1A, B, C, D, E, F, but 1A, label that what you think it is. 1A, put the right word. 1B, you don't have to do anything else except make a document and then put these correct answers in here. So let's go 1 through G today. Just label this, use this diagram here, but then create a document and attach it to the assignment. It has 1A. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to create a document. And let's call it, we'll create a new document. And let's call it your last name, Zavigalski wave label. And then all you have to do is 1A. And then tell me what you think 1A is. 1B, what do you think 1B is? So looking at that, not that, looking at that, 1A, 1B, 1C, tell me what you think they are, and then submit this. Don't share it with me. Submit it to the assignment you'll find in your Google Classroom, okay? So with this video and this diagram here, you should be able to do this assignment and participate. Participate, get an A. All right, everybody. See you tomorrow.